Welcome back to Knowledge is Kings, guys. I am Kings, and today we are being joined once again by Kingcraft.
Hello.
Welcome back to another episode of Knowledge is Kings, guys. I am Kings, and today we are being joined by Kingcraft, who is going to help us do our product today, which is a worktop bench.
so 5 years ago, we made a video making a mobile workbench. Well, now we're going to be making a sturdy workbench. That one was made out of 2x6s, and here we have $1,000 or more of maple, and we're going to be making a true woodworking workbench.
That's a lot of money.
And I brought him to to help me with the work on building this. Let's get to it. Real quickly, Future Kings here. I just want to interrupt and say this is a video that I started months and months ago, and actually my oldest son made that ribbon box, the wood ribbon box, after we had started filming this. So that's how long ago this was. I'm just trying to now finally finish it up. But now both my oldest boys work for me full time, which monopolizes a lot of their time. So you'll notice halfway through, my son stops working with me. He's a little too busy now, but I thought I'd just point that out now so you don't wonder like, hey, what happened? He's working all by himself now. So that's the reason why. And as I've said before, my company works on building houses, doing remodels and stuff like that. So that's what he's doing. Also, stick around to the end because there are a ton of outtakes when I was filming with my son, and it was super fun. There are tons of them. I did not put all of them in there, otherwise it would take forever. But if you're interested in that and just having a laugh, stick around to the very end. Okay, back to the video.
All right, now that he's gone, we can get to work. We're going to start with the top part of the table, bring him over to the miter saw and cut him down. I knew he wasn't going to help me. Oh, I got to do it again. All right, because I already have my stop set at 72, we're going to cut a whole bunch of boards at that length. Here's a quick tip. You see when the board is so crooked, you're going to have kickback like I did there. So what you're going to want to do is after you do your shallow passes, you're going to cut first in the back, come back up, and then do the full cut through the whole thing. Like this. All right, now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all of these to length. I'm going to take them over to the jointer and join to one edge and one face. I don't get paid enough for this, man. When jointing, you're going to want to use the nicest edge, because if we were to use the rough edge, we'd have to go this thickness, and we don't want to have to do all that work. I mean, I don't want to have to do all that work. And we'll use that jointed edge to rip it down on the table saw. Alright, since Mr. Big Boss that lounges around doesn't pay me and doesn't do anything around here is in here. I'm in charge now, and that machine's way too much work for me. So I'm just going to joint one edge, rip them down, and then send them through the planer. Now that I have one edge straightened on every single board, I'm going to rip them on this table saw. All right. All right, now that we have all the boards ripped to size, we're going to send them through the planer and then get them all glued up. All right, now that I sent them through the planer, I temporarily clamped them to make sure there weren't any gaps. And now I'm going to put them on the sawhorses and get them glued up with a roller. As you can see, I did it all by myself. Got it glued up, no problem. Now we can let this baby cook for 24 hours or so. Oh, I'm glad I'm done with that. Oh, all this by myself is so stressful. Now that I got the bench top all glued up, I followed all the same steps to make the legs, and I got those glued up as well. Now we're going to take everything out of the clamps and send them through the planer and the jointer to get it square and flat. No, I'm saying because you lifted up that whole side. All right, this is just out of the planer. I have this straight edge here. I'm going to show you how flat it is. As you can see, when you pull the whole thing across, there's no gaps or anything. If there were gaps, you would be able to see light coming through the bottom, but there are none. It's flat the whole way. Flat as can be. This right here is KingCraft approved. Since I already have a flat face here, I'm going to push it against this fence as I run it through to make the other edge flat and square to this face at the same time. Now that I have an edge and a face squared to each other, I'm going to put an X on that edge and that face so I know which side to keep on the bed of the planer when I send it through. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the other 3 legs.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
What? Now that I have all the legs squared up at the joiner, I'm going to send them through the planer to make the other sides parallel with one another to make the whole thing square. And for my first 2 passes, I'm going to do the X sides down, which ensure that I'm going to have the whole thing square. Now that I got these all squared up, I'm going to square up an end and then cut them to their final length. Apparently the saw can't cut this all the way through, so I'm going to cut off the rest with a handsaw. to sand it down. All right. Now that I have the legs cut to length, I'm going to cut the top to length using the track saw. If you were paying attention, you might have noticed that I was using two different saws. The first reason is because this saw can't cut through. It actually has a really small blade. And now you're wondering, well, why don't you just use the big saw the whole time that can cut all the way through? Well, this saw, since it has a smaller blade, is a lot easier to push through, and if you notice, it has a guardrail. It's a lot safer too. I won't have any injuries if I'm using this properly. It also can sit nicely on the table and is a lot lighter compared to this one, which can't sit on the table, and it's a lot heavier and a lot harder to push through the wood. And to even put this one on the track, you have to open the guard, leaving the blade exposed while cutting the wood. All this considered, this is a lot easier and safer to use for the initial cuts, and I would use it for the whole thing, except it cannot cut through, which leaves this as the only option for the last part of that board. Now the next thing we're going to do is lay out the legs for the mortise and tenons.
To cut out the mortises, I'm using a drill with a 90-degree attachment with a Forstner bit in the chuck. I make a few cuts around as a guide, then I remove the drill guide and freehand it for the rest of the way. Once I have it drilled out as deep as I want it to be, I remove what's left with a chisel.
proof that you can do it by hand right there.
Blood.
Mistakes were made.
I would say that, but that's So as I have shown you, making the mortises by hand is doable, but for me it is very slow. So for the rest of the mortises on this project, I'm going to be making them with my CNC. This is a lot faster and for me a lot more accurate. The bits in the CNC are round, so it makes the corners of the mortises round as well. So I did have to square up all the corners with a chisel once the CNC was done. Once the mortises are ready, I use a sliding T-bevel to mark the edges of the mortises on the legs for the tenons that will be cut on the legs. To cut the tenons on the legs, I'm using the crosscut sled I made in a previous video. For each side, I need to set the height of the blade. Once the height is set, I move the stop block on the sled to the length of the tenon I want, and the stop block will stay there until the legs are finished. Then I just made a bunch of passes moving the leg over by the same amount as the thickness of the blade until the side of the tenon is done. Then I adjust the blade height for the next side and repeat the process until all the tenon is finished. After the tenon is done, I test it in the mortise. It fit well, but if it didn't, I would just need to adjust whichever side didn't fit by taking a little more off on the table saw. Now, I did end up taking too much off of this leg, so I cut a thin scrap piece and glued it on the tenon, which once was dried, I recut it on the table saw. Again, to make the mortises on the legs, I'm using my CNC. There are 16 mortises, and it would have taken a long time to make them, but with the CNC, I can make all of them in less than 30 minutes. Okay, so to make the skirting basically for the top, I'm going to use the cutoff pieces that I have from the legs and the top itself. But the only problem is none of these are the 3.5 inches tall that I want. So, well, actually also they're not even thick enough because I want it to be 1.75 inches and they're at 1.5 inches. So that would mean I either have to glue these together like this, and then glue another one together like this, and then glue those together to get the proper thickness and everything. But then, if I tip these up and I have 2 of them, I only want this to be 1.75 inches, which means I'm wasting half of this. I gotta plane it down from 3 inches to 1.75 inches. So not only do I have kind of a longer glue up, you know, glue 2 sets up, let them sit there, and then plane them all down, get them nice, and then glue this up. So that's taking a lot longer. I'm also wasting lots of material. So as nice it would be to have you know, the least amount of joints going through the face of it that I can see, I think what I'm going to do instead is rip these down to just over 1 3/4 and glue them up like this. Then I only need 3 pieces for each one. And once I plane it all down, this will be the face that I see, and it'll already be almost at the thickness I need. I'll plane it down, and then after one glue up, I'll have everything I need. Now, they probably won't look quite as nice, but in terms of saving lumber, as this stuff's not really that cheap, I think this is the route I'm gonna go. Okay, so now I have these all planed, and you would think since they were all jointed before they were glued together that they'd be perfectly square. But if you look here, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that. Let me spin it around. It is not square. I don't know if you can see that gap through there. And the reason for this is because when I go to glue these together, here are my 3 pieces that I glue together, you think they glue together kind of like this. But when you put them in the clamps and that glue is now slippery, what happens is they can slip a little bit. Now this is an over-exaggeration. So now when they're all glued, it's like this. But when I put them into the planer, this is the planer bed here. But now pretend it's horizontal, so these are now sitting, it's hard to draw this, kind of at an angle like this. So that when I take that off, and then I flip it over and I flip it like this. These two sides now are parallel, but this side now is not 90 degrees. So whenever you glue something together like this, and now I just took it over the planer and sent it through at whatever angle both pieces had or I should say the face had two spots that were actually hitting the planer bed. It was sitting kind of like this, you know, that's probably over exaggerated. It wasn't quite that bad, but now that puts these two sides out of square with the two faces that are parallel with each other. So before I put tenons on these, I need to take this back over the joiner and square up the edges. So I spent the last little bit trying to figure out a good process for making the tenons on these rails. And these tenons are a little bit different than the ones that we put on the legs because I only have to make one cut on one side for these to fit in. So with that, I'm able to make the one cut that I need to make on my tenoning jig. Let me show you how I did it. Okay, once I bring it over here, you can see a couple things. One, we have these little fuzzies on here, which we can just easily take away with just a couple of strokes of a file. And then two, I now have square corners here, but the corners in my mortise are round. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a line here to represent where the end of the tenon is there. And then do the same thing on the other side. And I'm going to use my palm router to round over those corners. All right, once I have those corners rounded over, I can't quite get into the corner and I don't want to ruin this nice sharp edge out here. So what I'm going to do is take the file and just finish the round over. Then once I have that rounded over, it's time to test fit it in. So it looks like it's a good tight fit. I don't want to try to force it anymore because I think it's going to be kind of hard to get back out. I think I'm already going to have to beat apart the other one that I put together earlier. Once I know it's going to work out, I'm going to take this leg and put it in where it's going to go. Then I'm just going to take this piece, put it across here, and make a mark. That mark there now represents this same edge here for the other side. So I need to take a measurement from here, measure out the depth of my mortise, and that's going to be the length of my tenon, and then take it back over to the table saw and cut this tenon out. Now you can see after running it through, my tenon, or actually it's not my tenon, but my full length is still just a little bit long because I'm that far away from my line, which means I need to take that much off this end. So I'll do that at the miter saw and then rerun it through the table saw. And there we have it. You can just see the line was about half taken. So that's exactly what we want. Now I just need to take back over the table, round over the corners, and this piece will be done. So I have a little burning here from the saw. That's what happens if your saw is either a little dull, a little dirty, or you push too slow. Mine was a combination of all of them. So I'm just going to run this a really light pass on the jointer, see if I can't get that burning away. And there we go, that did the trick. Just a real nice light pass on there to get rid of that burning. I'm still going to put it down so when the table is right side up you wouldn't be able to see it anyway, but just nice to know that it's not there. All right, now I just got to test fit it inside the legs. But I want to make sure that it not only fits inside, but that once it's inside, these legs fit inside the table still. It's a little tight, so I'll just grab a clamp to squeeze it together a little bit. Now that I have that in, I know it fits. I've already got a process because I've done it now 3 times. I'm going to go ahead and make the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them and get this thing put together. Okay, so before I glue all these up together, I want to kind of just show you at the bottom, or I guess what's going to be the top of the leg here, this tenon is just a little bit shy of the mortise. And you never want to have this go all the way tight inside there, because once you add glue to this, if any glue gets trapped right in there, it'll create a hydraulic pressure against you, and you won't be able to squeeze this here tight if there's not a gap there. So you always want to make sure to leave a little bit of a gap, never go super tight. I just thought I wanted to point that out. Okay, so as much as I didn't want to put this all together, because it's actually going to be really hard to take apart, I wanted to put it together to make sure that it all was square once it's held together and that all the tenons from the legs lined up, because you know, kind of had my doubts on that. But it all fits nicely, so now I got to take the time to beat this thing apart. And to do that, I'm just going to take a block so I don't dent up all my legs with the hammer. And I'm just going to take the block and kind of tap this slowly apart. Some kind of fit in a little more tight than other ones, a little more tightly. But once I get it beat apart, then I can glue it up and put it back together. And I'm going to do it in sections because I don't think I'll be able to glue it up fast enough and clamp it all together before all the glue sets up, because that would be just a nightmare to get it half clamped up and the glue sets on you, and now there's gaps and everything. So I'm going to do like one section here, and then glue these in later. So it's going to be, you know, I'll probably let them sit for an hour before I take the clamps off and add new pieces to it. Okay, so one thing I just remembered what I need to do, and thankfully I remembered to do this before I glued it up, is I need to make a groove that goes along this whole edge. And that groove is going to be used for this piece here to slide back and forth. And this piece is going to hold a bunch of pins so that when I'm using the vise, I can have a pin in at whatever height I need so that it can hold boards up. And you'll see that being used in a future video. Okay, so as you can see, I started the dado in the wrong spot. I had the measurement between the blade instead of on the other side of the blade. So I made this little rounded piece to follow the diameter of the saw blade, which is 8 inches. So I just cut this little piece with a radius of 4 inches to kind of, not like that, fit in here. So I'm just going to glue that in place and then sand it off to match. So I need to clamp this, but I can't get any clamps inside here. So I'm just going to take some shims to put pressure on this inside and then clamp the whole thing together. Then I'll just let that set and then trim the excess away. Okay, so I was having trouble getting this beaten apart on these side ones. So what I'm going to do is I can take this off here and spin it around. And then I can slip it under here and use it to pry it apart. I'm not going to worry about getting any glue on the tenons themselves, I don't think, because it's such a tight fit already. I think just a little bit of glue in this side here would be good. Now that one's done, just got to repeat that with the other one and let these two set up. Then I'll work on the rails that go the other way. To glue up the longer rails of the table, I just set the rails in on one side and glued the other side. Once that side was set, I took it all apart and glued the other side. I switched from Titebond Original to Titebond 3 for this glue up, as it has a longer open time, meaning it doesn't set as fast, which would prevent me from getting the pieces together, since it takes quite a bit of time to get all the glue applied and the clamps tightened. And while the leg's set up, I'm making this piece on the CNC. Okay, so you can see I have it mostly cut out now, but I didn't have the CNC cut it all the way through because I'm going to need to put this on the table saw to machine it just a little bit more, and I wanted to have a square edge to work with. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to run this through the bandsaw, then use a flush trim router to trim it up, and then put little roundovers on all this that'll make the pins easier to put in and out. And this groove here is the groove that's going to fit into that slot that we dadoed into the bottom of one of the rails. Okay, so this is the area here that I want to take out, and that'll ride on a rail that has that same shape. So I want the height of the blade, which is set at 45, to match this height. It's about there. I was looking at this, and if I run this through against the fence like I was hoping, once it cuts this section out, my wood will no longer be sitting on anything here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set it down and use my miter gauge to run it through like this. That way it'll be a lot safer. So I just wanted to show here on the miter track that I put the stop down so that even if I was set wrong here just a little bit, like my board was too far that way, the stop would ensure that it would still be perfectly centered when I flip the board over. And as we can see here, it turned out exactly what I was looking for. So now I should be able to cut this all out, trim it up, and put little roundovers on these holes. Just rounding these corners over gives it such a better look than the square ones. And square edges are a lot more likely to chip on you and give you splinters. Even if you put a really small round over on there, 1/16 of an inch radius, it's better than having a square edge. Square edges can look nice, but they're more prone to chipping, splinters. If you slide your hand against it, it can give you like a wood cut, kind of like paper cut, but wood cut. But yeah, I'm going to continue doing this. I'm going to put round overs on these edges and then finish putting the round overs on these holes. I'm not going to bother to round over the backside holes since they'll be on the back. You'll never really see them and it won't provide me any benefit. I like these rounded because it'll help put the little pins in. Now to create the rail that's going to go in here, I'm just going to cut the opposite. And now I have it drawn to a point, but in order to reduce friction, I don't want to get this right up there. I'll cut it a little bit wider so that there's a flat spot on the top to reduce the friction in here. If I try to get it exact and that point's rubbing right in that point there, it'll create a lot more friction. Now I will be adding some lubricant to it, but all the same, I don't want this to go to a point. So when I cut it, there'll be just a little bit of a flat spot. This is a little bit rough right now, but once I kind of sand this up a little bit, add some wood lubricant, it'll slide a lot better. And realistically, this is more to stop it from going left and right, because once it's in there, I can lift it up a little bit, slide it over, and then drop it back down. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit here. Okay, so I have this all glued together here. But before I try to put it in here, it's a really tight fit. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of the corners off with the chisel. And if you don't have real sharp chisels, and I keep mine extremely sharp, but if you don't have any of these, you can just hit it with a sander or something if you wanted to make this. Once I have everything prepped, it's time to tip this up. This is very heavy. So I'm going to be using a couple of blocks here, just leftover scrap, to hold it up so that when I push it in, one side can't just sink all the way down and then stop me from getting the other side in because it's at too much of an angle. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so the glue up is done. And do you ever notice I say okay a lot? The next step is going to be putting on that slide piece that I made for the piece that's going to fit in here. And then that's going to be the end of this video. And then in the next one, I'll show putting all the hardware on. Wheels that can pop on and off when you want to move it. And the vise, drilling the top for all the pegs. But I'll finish this up in the morning once the glue is set up. So it's the next day, these clamps are ready to come off, and since I'm all alone and this thing is incredibly heavy, I'm going to use my forklift to help me lift it off here and get it turned around. I got it flipped over, and it actually didn't even really do any damage. It's got some dirty scuff marks there, but it actually didn't really dent that corner when I rolled it over on the tines. I'm actually pretty impressed that this sharp corner held up. I mean, it's hard maple, but still, this thing is really heavy all on that one little kind of point. Let's see what it did on this side. Yep, just the same dirtiness from the tines, but it's still a sharp little corner. Pretty cool. So the final thing I'm going to do for this video is to install this track, which this rides on. And one thing I wanted to show you, these are the pins that would go in these holes. So without the rounded corners, these holes are very precise, and you got to be able to get this perfectly straight before it'll go in. And once it's in, it slides nicely, but it can't be at an angle. So if it's at an angle at all, it will not go in. And this rounded corner here just helps it to get in just a little bit better to help you line it up. You're not fighting that corner so much. It kind of can glide down there. But like I said, even with this, you know, if you're going in at a little bit of an angle, these holes are really precise so that it actually feels like, why isn't this going in? But then if you line it up and get it in, once it's in there, it moves really nicely. They're just very precisely cut holes on the CNC. You know, I set these for 3/4, and I think these are a couple thousandths of an inch smaller than 3/4 of a diameter. But you can see once they're lined up, they go in really nicely with no slop or wiggle. So just a real nice little system. But let's get this attached. So this, hello there. So this is the side that has the track in it for this to just slip in there. And then it has to be able to go in enough to clear this little peak. You see that there? Which is, so then when it falls down, now there is play in there. I'm not entirely sure how I would get rid of that, and I don't think it's really all that important. It has to have play for me to be able to hold it at an angle like this, to get it in and then down, which is why this is so big, because if I couldn't get that up, I couldn't get it over this rail here. And then you can see once it's on there, I can move it side to side. And like I said, I'll go over this more in the next video when we add the vise and everything, what exactly this is going to be used for. Anyone else ever had trouble like opening these? They like glue themselves shut. You think they'd make it out of a plastic that it doesn't stick to very well. Now, like I said before, this isn't super smooth. I don't actually know that I really need it to be, because I can lift it up and slide it wherever if it was that hard. I mean, it's not supposed to be buttery smooth. It's just I get it into my position. I add the pin wherever I want it to be, and I'm good to go. But if I want, I could add a little wood lubricant like I used in my bread box video to make this slide a lot smoother, but I don't even know if that's really necessary. Well, that's going to do it for this video, which is going to be part 1. In the next video, I'm going to be going over the bench vise and how to put that in, what wheels I chose here, and these are special ones that actually can clip right off of the worktop. So when you want to move it, you can, but when you don't want to move it, the wheels aren't sitting here for something you to run your feet in. I'll go over bench dogs. You saw the one that I already used, and this one is a standoff one where you can set, it's like a bench cookie. It's like one of those cookies that have this anti-slip stuff, so you can set these in your bench, which we haven't made the holes for those yet on the top, but we will in the next video, so you can do sanding easier more easily. You can sand more easily without your material shifting all over. These nice little metal bench dogs has a flat spot right here to press up against, and even these bench dog vices where you can put them in there and you can crank this in and really get it tight. We'll go over all that in the next video. Be sure to keep an eye out for part 2. I'd like to say it'll be next week, but knowing my crazy schedule, it doesn't ever happen as much as I want. But we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Roll them. Oh, camera. Did you watch your video?
What about it?
Did you watch it that you did a few years ago?
I've watched it before, like multiple times.
When was it?
Welcome back to another episode.
5 years ago. Okay, so this is how it...
Now, just kidding, guys. I am Kings, and today we are being joined by King Craft, who is going to help us do our project
Hello.
today, which is a worktop bench. Now, King...
Okay, so I want you to do that same deal.
Hello. So you're gonna pat me on the shoulder and be like, hello. Wait, was I on your left or your right?
Just the way you are now.
Okay. So I'm just gonna say hello.
Hello. Hello, governor.
All right, I have my arms crossed, right? Yeah. I'm just gonna smile at you awkwardly like I did in the video.
You should go like this. Like between me and the camera. Like look all awkward. Okay.
I'm sweating a little bit.
It's like myself, buddy. Okay.
Just say that one more time. Now that he's gone, we can get to work.
But then continue talking.
Okay. Now that he's gone, we can get to work. We're gonna take the top pieces down, cut them down for the top piece. All right, now that he's gone, we can get to work and start building the top part of the table.
Too fast.
All right, now that he's gone, we can get to work. We're gonna start with the top part of the table. All right, now that he's gone, we can get to work on the top part of the table. What? Now that I did all that work. We're gonna take him over to the joiner and join one edge to one face.
Or you'd be like,
Now that he's not around, is he? I have done all this work and cut all of them to, oh my God. All right, now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all of these to length. We're gonna take him over to the jointer and join one edge to one face. What? Now that we have done all this work, no, not really. Now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all of these to length. We're gonna take him over to the jointer and join, What?
I'm going to say we, and then you say I, and then you go right back to we again.
I did?
Yep.
Oh yeah, because you're around. All right, now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all of these to length. We're gonna take him over to, I did it again. All right, now that, I was gonna say I first time. All right, now that he's not around, is he? I have cut him to length. I'm gonna take him over to the jointer and join one edge to one face.
No, it's not joint to one face.
Is it and? I can't get to the one line right. Oh, not again. Now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all of these to length. I'm gonna take him over to the jointer and join one, no, I almost said it again. Now Now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all these to length. I'm going to take them over to the jointer and join one edge and one face. Let's do that again. I paused for a second to add the teeth.
Now I know why they have 100 takes.
I raised my eyebrows and the whole glasses lift up. All right, now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all these to All right, now that he's not around, is he? I have cut all these to length. I'm going to take them over to the jointer and join one edge and one... Dang it. What, I forgot what I was saying after that. Can I just start from there? You want me to do that part again? Forgot what I was saying. Says Mr. Big Boss that just lounges around all day, doesn't pay me, and gets all the money isn't here. I'm in charge now, and I don't like that machine. It's too much work for me. I'm doing too fast, aren't I? You want me to do that part again? Was that still too fast?
No, that was fine.
All right, now that I have these edges all jointed, I'm gonna strip them. No, it's not strip. It's not strip, is it? Now that I have all these boards jointed, now that I have one edge straightened on every single board, I'm gonna rip them on the table saw. Now that I have one edge straightened on it.
That's unhappy.
What? I should probably turn it on. All right, now that is the camera even facing me? Can it see me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. It looks like it's like looking down here.
I'm looking at the thing.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now it was about you.
Now that we got them all planed up, I put them on a temporary. That's too fast.
Too fast.
You want me to do that part again? Now that we get them all planed up, I put them on a temporary sawhorse to see that there weren't going to be any.
These are temporary sawhorses.
Oh, they're temporary clamps. All right, now that we got them all planed up, I put a. Oh, I was going to say I put them on a temporary. All right, now that we got them all planed.
Take 211. Action.
All right, now that we got them all planed, I put them. Dang it. All right, now that we got them all planed, I temporarily clamped them to make sure there weren't going to be any gaps. I'm not going that fast. All right, now that we sent them all through the planer, I temporarily clamped them and to. I don't know why I said it like that. All right, now that I temporarily
plane them. This is. I'll unplane them here in a moment.
I forgot all that stuff because Dad did all that big mean stuff.
Forgot all that stuff because Dad did that big mean stuff.
Stop taking your chair.
All right, we'll try that again. Try it again.
But I just did it.
All right, now that I planed them, I was gonna say we. All right, now that I planed them, I'm gonna put a. All right, now that I planed them, I put them all temporarily on a clamp, and to make sure there weren't any gaps for when we.
Terrible. You're like, wait, where am I going with this?
No, I see. There's so many cuts in your videos. All right, now that we sent them all through the planer, I temporarily clamped them to make sure there weren't going to be any glaps for when we. Glaps. All right, now that we got them all planed up, I put them on a temporary clamp. And now that I sent them all through the planer, I temporarily put them on.
This is your table.
And now that I sent them all through the planer, I temporarily clamped them up to make sure there weren't going to be any glaps. Glaps. I did it again.
It's a new word now. There's some glaps there.
Got another quick glap. All right, now that I sent them all through the planer, I temporarily clamped them to make sure there weren't going to be any glaps.
Seriously.
Cut.
Glaps.
I keep thinking I'm gonna glue them, and I'm clamping them, and I've got the gaps left. So I got the gaps in the gluing. Now I can't even say it normally. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Once I got the tabletop glued up, we did this whole. Once I got the tabletop glued together, I did the same process for both the legs, and I got them all glued up now. Once I got the tabletop all glued together, I did the same process for. Once I got the tabletop glued together, I did the same steps. Is that what you said? Both of them?
Yeah.
Once I got the bench top all glued together, Once I got the bench top all glued together, I did the same. I followed the same steps. Once I got the bench top glued together, I followed the same steps for the legs, and now I have them all glued up right here. Why do you always do that? Now that I got the bench top glued up, I followed all the same steps to make the legs, and I got them glued up as well. Now I'm gonna take them out of the legs. Dang it.
I like to see that.
You gotta take the glue out of the leg, but not the leg out of the glue. Same steps to make the legs and got them glued up as well. Now we're gonna take everything out of the.
That's awesome.
I didn't play the Looney Tunes theme. Like edit like the circle thing at the end. I feel bad for whoever's doing post-production.
Oh my goodness,
Do they care that that's there? Can you see it? Yep. Now that I have an edge, that's too fast. Now that I have an edge and a square, now that I have an edge and a face square to each other, I'm gonna put an X on that edge and that square that are square to each other. That's square. Dang it. Hold up. I forgot the last part, didn't I?
Well, just start from there. Now I'm gonna do the rest. Do the same thing to the other 3 legs.
Now that I have all the legs squared up at the jointer, that's not, should I say that or should I say? Now that I have all the legs squared up at the jointer, I'm gonna run them through the planer to get all the sides square to one another. To do that, I'm gonna start with the edge down, X down. Now that I have all the legs squared up at the jointer, I'm gonna send them through the planer to get them all edges and faces squared up to each other. Now that I have these all squared up at the jointer, I'm gonna, now that I have them all squared up, all the legs. Now that I have all the legs squared up at the joiner, I'm gonna run them through the planer to make the other sides parallel to one another, making the whole thing square. And to do that, I'm gonna run the first pass through the planer. What?
Side down.
Yeah, I didn't know if how I said it was fine. Now that I have all the legs squared up from the jointer. Now that I got all the legs squared up at the jointer, I'm gonna run them through the planer to make that's too. Now that we have the legs cut to length, we're gonna do the same and cut the. We'll be right back. Right after this message. Now that we have the legs cut to length, we're gonna cut the top to its final length. How? Now that we have the legs cut to length, we're gonna do the same and cut the top to the length using the track saw. Did I say we? Now that we have the legs cut to length, we're gonna cut the top.
Oh, the very first word.
Cut the legs to length, I'm gonna cut the top to the. I'm too focused on not saying we that I can't say the right words.
We have to have a teleprompter out just for all your lines.
Yeah, you wanna put the ums and the glaps in there?
You got it right.
It's a miracle. When jointing, we're gonna wanna joint from our nicest face, because if we were gonna do it from this.
Nicest edge.
Nicest edge. When jointing, you wanna do it from your nicest edge, because if I were to do it over here, we'd have to joint down all the way up to this width, but I don't wanna do that, so we're gonna do it from the nicest width. Nicest width? Nicest edge. When jointing, you're gonna wanna use the nicest, joint the nicest face, not use. When jointing, you're gonna wanna joint the nicest edge, because if we were gonna joint this side, we would have to go all the way up to this width, and we don't wanna do that. And then, what? Every time I'm like reciting something, I always do it fast. Ask Mom, that's how I do my hymns too.
Roll
When jointing, we're gonna wanna use the nicest edge, because if we were to use the rough, I did it too fast again, didn't I?